Everybody, this is Freddie Cardoza at Podcast Seminary. Podcast Seminary helps you grow in your faith. And we are in part 5, it's hard to believe, part 5 of this 8-part series, Enjoy the Ride. And what we're talking about is that we need to enjoy the ride of life in spite of all the craziness that sometimes happens. Now, in the first session, we talked about the providence of God. Secondly, we talked about God's immutability. Thirdly, we talked about God's sovereignty. Fourthly, we talked about the love of God. And now in session 5, we're talking about the fact that God knows everything. Now, for those of you who are Bible scholars, you know that the word for that is omniscience. Now, you get 2 words in omniscience, right? One is omni, the other is science. Science is knowledge, that's the word, what science means. Omni means all. So all science or all knowledge, omniscience. So God's omniscience means that God is all-knowing. Now the thing about it is, we see this really, I think the best passage that I can think of is really in a surprising place because it's not really what we would call a real doctrinal book, but it's something that's found in the book of Job. What happened was that, like us, Job had gone through so many crazy things. I mean, horrible things that happened to Job. Things that you would never wish on your worst enemy, but they happened. And so in the midst of all that, Job had an encounter where he finally got so hopeless, he did what we've done. He cries out to God and said, God, what's going on? I mean, come on, God. And then God said these amazing things to him. God goes through this passage and in about 40 or 50 questions, he just asked Job question after question. And basically he says, Job, where were you when I did this? Where were you when I did this? Don't you know that I have the seas in my hand and the firmament is in my scope and all these various amazing things. And what God was teaching in that amazing, glorious passage is that he is all-knowing. So the thing is that when we're going through challenges in life and we're having a hard time enjoying the ride, what we've got to remember is that God knows everything. And the thing is, now watch this, God knows everything that is actual. God knows everything that is possible. God knows everything that has happened. God knows everything that will happen. Now follow that. Conceptually and actually. Past, present, and future. And because of God's great mind, because God knows everything that's happening, he can then calculate things in our lives, and then he can supernaturally work in our lives to make sure that everything comes out. You see, the thing is that God will never be outwitted. You see, the thing is, because of God's great mind, and work with me just for a second on this idea, God's mind is so great, and he's sovereign in the lives of every single person. And in the 7.3 billion people in our world today, God has an individual type of relationship with them as their creator. And what happens is God is aware intimately in his great mind of everything going on in every single person's life. And God has a plan. This is nuts, right? God has a plan for each and every one of those 7.3 billion people. And some of them are coming in entrances and some in exits as they come and pass through life. But God is sovereignly loving all of them. And as he's loving all of them, even though he gives us free will and lets us do what he wants, God masterfully, brilliantly is aware of everything that's happening, and he coordinates their lives in order to help them find his will, trying to bring them to himself, and that includes us. And as we come to faith and we start to know who he is, what he's like, and then submit ourselves to him, we can trust that that great knowledge of God will not be caught off guard. He will not be surprised. He knows what your neighbor's planning against you. He knows what your ex-husband does. He knows all the factors. He knows everything that could possibly happen. He knows that it is or isn't going to rain. It is or isn't going to snow. It is or isn't going to be windy like this. And he takes all that into consideration and he enacts, watch this, his perfect will in your life in spite of it all. And because God knows everything, we can trust him. He knows every single thing, and he then enacts his great power to work out things for the good in our lives. And this has been Session 5, Enjoy the Ride. And Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to share, because there's others besides us that need this kind of content from God's Word. Thanks so much for listening. This is Dr. Freddie Cardoza signing off from Podcast Seminary.